coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am finally at my own house this time around, guys. Good to be back in my own environment here. Welcome in, guys. I'm glad you guys could join us for today's show. We are talking Dynasty running backs. We're going to talk about some values for certain running backs. We're going to do a two-part series on this. This is part one. We're going to kind of break down a lot of fun things this week here on today's show. But before we get to that, guys, let me introduce the crew today. Of Coach Tyler is back in action. What's going on, Coach Tyler?
What's up, guys? Glad to be back. Let's get it.
Yeah, I love it. Coach Gibbs probably won't be making a late guest appearance today. Probably not, but I'm sure he'll be around at some point. And, of course, we have today's guest on the show, a friend of the show, Dave. What is going on, my friend? How are you, brother?
First day of the offseason, ready to talk some ball. Everybody go make a trade today.
Yes, I did make a trade today, so please continue that trend. It's fun to make trades in the offseason. It really jumps the blood of the league, and hopefully more trades start happening then. So, all right. So, again, appreciate you guys both for being here today. Obviously, thanks for those who are tuning in, whether you're listening live or if you're listening afterwards. We get a lot to talk about today, guys. So, news-wise, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Were you guys surprised? Did you guys make any money?
Made a little bit. Made a little bit. I told my buddy early, and I said it really comes down to, defense, coaching, and peaking at the right time. 49ers were a tough matchup, and obviously it was a close one, and somehow Chiefs were underdogs. But Steve Spagnuolo, as the defensive coordinator, is such an X factor. And then you hear all this other stuff about the coaching that came out today with the overtime stuff. But I did have the Chiefs. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, as much as I love Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes was the edge. And then you had the coaching edge on top of the defense. It's too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think Steve Spagnuolo is actually the first defensive coordinator to win multiple championships with different teams.
To win 4, yeah.
So that was pretty interesting for his own sake there. So good for him. So like I said, today's show, guys, we're talking Dynasty. We're really getting that Dynasty frame now. We're going to kind of talk about some running backs, some of their values moving forward, some maybe potential, should you trade for them, should you not, how they stack up against the rookie class, kind of, whether or not you should trade them away for rookie picks or some other players. So we're going to get right into it. In today's episode, we are talking about the rookie running backs from the 23 draft and the free agent running backs. So you get a little free agency preview as well for today's show. So let's start with the 2023 running backs, and we'll start with the studs. And obviously the top 3 running backs from this class year that had the biggest impact was Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Devon Achane. Obviously, all 3 of them at points this season were fantastic. But the big question is moving forward, and maybe it might not be a big question or not, who is the best out of this bunch here? Who would you rather have moving forward? Dave, since you're our guest, I will allow you to go first, my friend.
Oh, man, this is definitely tough because you love the situation with Gibbs and what he was able to do. And you also, you got to love the pass catching backs. People, they want every back to get 30, touches like Saquon Barkley does. But those backs don't usually last as long. And you look at, Ezekiel Elliott and guys that, start breaking down a little bit. They're getting 250, 300 carries. And so, is Bijan going to get that kind of workload now that Arthur Smith's out of town? We'll find out. I'm still going to go Bijan, but it's super close. And if you could tell me I could get Jahmyr Gibbs plus a little something for Bijan, I would take it. They're just so close. But give me Bijan, then give me Gibbs.
All right. I like it. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about this group here?
Yeah, I was in the camp of just about everyone else on Twitter whenever Jahmyr Gibbs got drafted, as high as he did by the Lions. There's a reason I was sitting on the couch because I thought that was a major reach, and I didn't see the vision that they had for him. Obviously, having already brought David Montgomery in, But especially with Ben Johnson returning this next year, we know what Gibbs's role is going to be. We know, there's more that could be added to it in terms of getting him more work on the ground. But like Dave said, he's that pass catcher. He's going to get, if you're in those half point or even full point, especially those full point PPR leagues, he's that guy that's going to be able to bring in, 4 or 5 points off of those receptions. And I think with just the uncertainty of what Bijan's going to be, and especially they don't have their quarterback yet coming out of the draft. They don't have a defined role for him yet. Obviously, he's a star and he's a phenomenal athlete. But I think going into next season, like Dave said, if I have Bijan and I can get Jameer plus on top of that, I'm going to take that in a heartbeat. But just with situation-wise, I kind of put Gibbs, 0.001 points ahead of Bijan just because we know what to expect out of him.
Right. And I think that's a great breakdown from both of them guys. To me, it's who I believe will survive or sustain consistency throughout the rest of their at least rookie contract, probably more. And I think Robinson has that X factor on that situation. And Gibbs is fantastic. RB6 in the back half of the season. Amazing work out of him. The good thing he is splitting time and he's being used how we wanted a guy like DeAndre Swift a few years ago to be used in Detroit. And he's actually being used that way now, and he's going to continue to be a factor. But with Bijan Robinson, I do believe that eventually he is going to be the main guy there. Tyler Algier, yes, he's been a nice compliment to him, but this is going to be a team that's going to run through Robinson this time around when they bring in this new coaching staff. I do believe we saw last year. You see with the OC coming in, Zach Robinson, with the Rams, he had Kerryon Williams, a smaller guy, lead this team in carries by a lot. There was no one else near him. Robinson, I think, can be that guy and actually handle that kind of workload. While the receptions might come down a little bit, especially the targets, you could see a guy from 214 carries to maybe going up to 280 carries and seeing more of that red zone work there and have potential touchdowns. So if I'm having to pick somebody here, it's got to be Bijan for me. But like I said, you guys kind of made the same point. Gibbs is pretty close, though. He's really not far off. All right, so talking about these three backs here now, and talking about draft picks. Now, we all know that the top 4 picks, for the most part right now, unless something wild changes, maybe the top 3 at least, are likely going to be, in Superflex leagues, are likely going to be quarterbacks and things like that, and Marvin Harrison Jr. If you were to have one of these top 4 picks, let's say you're a contender and somehow you end up with one of these top 4 picks, would you rather, it could be team dependent and whatnot, but would you rather trade your top 4 pick for one of these running backs, or would you not rather just draft somebody in those spots instead? Dave, you can go first again. Yeah,
I mean, it's always difficult to invest in running backs in Dynasty. If you're going with a singular pick and it's the 103, 104, you're looking at, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors kind of a deal. And so, of course you want to trade, you want to get a little bit more value and get, give them 107, 108, but it's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to have to give up a top 3, top 4 pick for Bijan and Gibbs, and you're probably going to have to give up a little more. And so that's where it gets a little tricky for me. And so, yes, it's team dependent, but in a vacuum, I'm probably going to take the quarterback and I'm going to take the receivers, because if this was a super flex draft startup, I'm taking those positions ahead of these guys. 104 is where I'd think about it.
Coach Tyler?
Yeah, definitely kind of resounding answer right there. I'd be taking Caleb Williams above these 3. I'd be taking Drake May, who honestly is probably the better quarterback, above these 3. And then if Marvin Harrison is everything that he's supposed to be, then he's an easy slam dunk above these 3. And so I think I would start to think about it in that 104 if I could just go 1-4 straight up for a Bijan. But like Dave said, you're not going to get that 1-for-1. You're going to kind of have to add on to it.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have to add more pieces. I feel like I'm in a lot of weird situations where I have my team built around and I'm missing running backs, and I have like the 104, 105, and I'm like, wonder how I should handle that moving forward. But in a vacuum here, you're probably going to want one of these top 4 picks, because the value you're getting for someone wanting a quarterback or somebody wanting Marvin Harrison Jr. is so much more than going out there to go get a running back that has a shelf life of maybe 3 years at max, where you could potentially get 6+ years from one of those top 4 picks in rookie drafts this year. So, and then last but not least, let's talk about Devon Achane. Obviously, we know about Achane and his short run in the early part of the season where it was just unstoppable. I mean, he led the lead in yards per carry of this past season here. Do you guys find that he can be a consistent option moving forward, or are you guys concerned with his smaller frame and maybe Raheem Mostert? If you find him as a threat, he's never going to live up to potentially what we saw his rookie season. Tyler, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah. With Raheem Mostert, I really think that this was one of those anomaly seasons. We look at his season, and this is the healthiest he's been in a long time. And this is by far the most he's produced ever in his career. And they were pulling up stats during the back half of the season where his touchdown numbers for this season alone were rivaling his entire career. And so I think that the regression of Mostert is definitely going to help Achane get more of a consistent role. But also, like you said, the big knock on him going into the draft was smaller frame, easier to kind of knock around. And he started off as explosive as anyone thought he would be. But he also, that smaller frame started to get knocked around a little bit, and we started to see a couple missed games start stacking up on top of each other. So I think he can be a consistent option with Mostert's, expected regression. But I would like to see him continue to add on to his frame and get a little bit bigger and a little bit more sturdy, just so we can see him stay healthy and not be one of those guys that is explosive when you get him, but also could miss half the season off of one tackle.
All right. Dave, how do you feel about Achane in this situation?
Yeah, I think with all these running backs, what makes it interesting, if you're doing any type of mock drafts, looking at any type of rookie ADP right now, you're seeing 0 running backs going in the first round of Superflex mock drafts, rookie only. In your drafts, somebody is going to, people are thirsty for running backs in Dynasty. Someone's going to jump into that first round. And so when we're looking at trade value for these guys, would you just rather take an Achane if you can get him for, the 109 or something like that? As far as being a consistent option, I do think that we all need to, not every running back needs to look like Saquon Barkley, and we need to kind of look back at our view on things. Same thing with Devonta Smith and some of these smaller Jordan Addison, smaller receivers. But, the concerns, and then he gets hurt in the preseason, misses time, comes back, scores 100 fantasy points in 4 weeks is ridiculous, and then gets hurt again. And then before he comes back for a quarter, gets hurt again. And so, yeah, he could be a player you could buy low on, but he's also someone that, cautiously optimistic, where is this a Javid Best situation, or is this a situation where he is just a smaller player? And, is he, we're fine. Like Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler and Aaron Jones, those guys never had over 200 carries, but they always had about 250, 300 touches. And so can he sustain that work? I don't know. And so I'm not willing to pay what the current cost is. I'll tell you that much.
And I don't like that answer from either one of you guys because I'm a Dolphins fan. So Devon Achane is the greatest back of all time. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Achane is definitely a stop and pause situation, and you have to really evaluate your fantasy team and see what you have really going on, because, I've definitely thrown trades out there for the 111, 112 and see if someone does bite, because I feel like at that point there's good value for Devon Achane. He does come with upside in his play here, but he's never going to be to what I think Gibbs is, or even close to what Bijan Robinson is going to be. He's never going to probably be a workhorse back. You're going to have to hope that he consistently, can be as efficient as he is. And he can be, because he's a home run threat kind of guy. He only needs 1 or 2 plays to really take it to the house. But again, staying on the field is a major concern for Devon Achane. Obviously, that was a concern coming out of college. We obviously saw it already this coming season here, hurt constantly. So he could potentially be a decent, consistent option, but I don't know if I'm saying I don't think he's ever going to be a consistent fantasy option week in and week out. I think there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and there's always going to be potential for him to get hurt. But taking a risk with this rookie class that are coming in, again, I haven't done my full analysis yet, but based on what I've been doing already, it's not a great class. It's decent, but it's really not good at all. So taking a guy like Devon Achane could be worth taking one of your late round picks as a contender. But, trading away your 108, 109 because you have a need at running back, probably would rather just not trade Achane and go a different direction and find that running back once you're ready to compete in season.
And one last point, Steve. As far as his injuries in college, he did play in the SEC. It was not a small school guy. No. And he did get a nice workload there, nice volume. And he also ran in between the tackles really well. He only missed 2 games. He had an injury to his foot. It didn't need surgery or anything. It was a mild foot sprain, missed 2 games. So, we all assumed because of the size that he'd have some, but I do want to clear up. He did not have an injury history in college. And, the 2 injuries that he received this year, that was, the bulk of his injury history.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you. All right, over to the next set here, the role players. These are basically players that, were backups this past season here. I guess you could have called it Devon Achane a backup, but all these guys, they had sparks at points at the season, not as frequent as the last guys, but they all kind of made a noise here and there. You're looking at guys like Tajay Spears, Jalen McLaughlin, Zach Charbonnet, Roschon Johnson, Keaton Mitchell, Amari DiMercado, and Chase Brown, all at some point for the most part, flashed. But out of this grouping here, guys, who do you like the best moving forward? If there's one guy you could go out there and get right now, if you could, who would that guy be? Dave?
Strictly off of this list,
yes.
I'm going to go with Tajay Spears. I think he's got the clearest path to success. He also has got pretty good draft capital. Not the best on the list, but I think second best on the list. And on top of it, we saw it. There's only a few guys where we actually saw it. Spears, another smaller guy. No injury concerns or anything like that. He played well. He actually ate a little bit of Derrick Henry's time there. And then Derrick Henry literally gave a farewell speech on his last game there. So he's gone. We just don't know what else they're going to bring in. They're obviously going to bring in another running back, but what does that look like? Is it someone that's going to compete with him for the top spot, or is it someone that's going to be his clear backup?
All right. Coach Tyler?
Yeah, Dave just took all my points, so I'll pivot and drop down to I'd say if I'm not going Spears, I'd go Charbonnet. He had a good workload. He was one of those guys coming out of college. He had very consistent numbers coming through at UCLA, and coming into the league, he went to one of the only spots that you didn't want him to go to because he was sitting behind another young, great back in Kenneth Walker. But one thing we've seen from Kenneth Walker in his career in the NFL is these little lingering injuries that come up. And I know Charbonnet missed part of this season along with Walker, and they kind of flip-flopped time. But I think Charbonnet has a path to at least have a 2-headed monster there in Seattle, if not to be one of the main beneficiaries of, if we see this consistent injury history from Kenneth Walker where he's playing, 8 to 10 games a season as opposed to a full 14 through 16 that we'd need for a fantasy season, or 14 through 17 now. Then he has the clearest path to not only have that 2-headed monster workload, but then also we know that he would take on most of that Kenneth workload once he, we don't want to say inevitably or think that anyone's going to go out, but if we see the consistent numbers behind it, inevitably Kenneth going out, Charbonnet would immediately benefit from.
I like it. Yeah, I think I would probably lean towards Spears on my end as well, to be honest. If you're looking for a guy who has the clearest path for starting job this coming season, it's definitely Spears. I'll do what Tyler did and kind of pivot here, and I'm going to probably say for me, Roschon Johnson is the second guy I like on this list here still. I liked him coming out as a prospect. Rookie year didn't go well. Pretty obviously, he wasn't really involved for most of the season. He was involved. He just really never got his shot to be the guy there. And whether or not they liked him, or if it was a scheme thing, or whether or not they just trusted the veteran running backs on the team here more in there. Roshan really just didn't get his opportunity to shine on the field to show what he really could do. And plus, Justin Fields likes to run the ball a little bit more. You're not getting the dump off passes that Johnson could have probably had this coming season here. But Foreman's gone this year. Khalil Herbert, I like him as a player, but he also has a little bit of nagging injury history since being in the NFL now. So Roschon Johnson has a chance to really eventually this season potentially step up and have a role in this offense. They could be switching to a rookie quarterback. We don't know what's going to happen still. That means that we could be potentially seeing a little bit more running from this Bears offense on the ground with the running backs and not the quarterbacks if they happen to make that switch. And Johnson is someone that you probably can get a little bit cheaper than Spears right now. I think Spears is a hot commodity, which makes all the sense because we all want him. But Johnson, I don't think is being talked about enough because of how quiet his rookie season was. So he could definitely be a target for you right now. Going over to Spears real quick, we talked about Devon Achane. I mean, I did at least, being a guy who I would like, giving up the 111, 110 for him. Would you guys be doing that for a guy like Tyjae Spears? Would you risk giving up the 110 for Spears' services? Do you believe that's worth it?
I feel like at this point in the offseason, I wouldn't, just because of, like Dave said, they're obviously going to have to bring someone else in, and we don't know if they're taking a second or third round running back, if they're going to bring someone in off of free agency. We've got guys that are going to talk about like later, like Saquon or Josh Jacobs, that they could use to fill that spot with Henry. And then, Spears kind of resides back into the role that he was in. But I think at this point in the offseason, no, if the chips or the cards start to fall right for him, then 100%, if we go into draft season and we know the Titans aren't taking anyone until the 5th round and Spears is going to be the lead guy back there and that's what the offense is going to flow through, then I'm 100% throwing that out there. But I think at this point in the offseason, there's too many risk factors in terms of we don't know who he's going to be competing with for a spot, if he's going to be competing for a spot, or what that offense is going to look like.
Dave, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, same thing. Too much volatility. I don't like to buy running backs at this point of the offseason, whether they're going to get hurt, whether they're going to get replaced. Let's get through free agency. Let's get through the draft before we even start talking and thinking about this. But you still got, all the major running back injuries that happen in the training camp and preseason. I feel like you're buying him at his, you're paying full price. You're getting no discount at all. And this pick could be worth the 210 if they sign, even a mid-tier free agent. Let's say they brought Joe Mixon over. Let's say Zach Moss comes over. You got some concerns. And if they were to get Saquon or Josh Jacobs, then it just completely wipes out the value. He's 310. So the too much volatility where, like, if all things went in your favor, what's he worth? Like, at best, 109, 110. So, like, you're basically paying the top dollar, in my opinion.
All right. I like your guys' play there. Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to trade the 110 right now. I'd probably rather have the 110 right now and see how things go. I'd probably rather hold on to Spears and wait and see, but if I'm definitely, I wouldn't be trading the 110 to pick his services right now. Even though, Dave, you don't like talking about trading for running backs, that's what we're going to do over these next two questions here. Would you guys rather trade an early second round pick right now for either Zach Charbonnet? Again, I'm pretty high on Roschon Johnson, so I put Roschon Johnson in there myself. Would you guys be willing to give up a second for their service? Or do you think it's fair value? Let's say that. I think it's fair value for their services right now on your dynasty rosters.
I'll go first. So I think it's a little too high when you're looking at it. I think Charbonnet it's close value, but again, looking at these mock drafts, you're literally getting the option to take a top 2 back in this class, and you know that he's going to be behind Kenneth Walker for at least 2 or 3 years. And so you look at, let's just give Blake Corum as an example. Blake Corum has got the highest on the consensus mock draft board. He goes to Baltimore. He goes to the Chargers. We know the Chargers are going to run the crap out of the ball. I would much rather have my option of one of those guys Mid second is where I probably think about Charbonnet. And then Roshan, probably lower on the board, early third.
Early third. Okay. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, definitely feel the same. I do have Charbonnet above Roshan, but I do also have a love for Roshan. He's on a lot of my dynasty teams because I was, buying into the Senior Bowl hype, hoping he'd be everything that he showed off there. But yeah, definitely feel like, we talk about that early second, like Dave was talking about, kind of peak value. You're paying full price for what they could be. And I think the ability to pick and choose in the early second, because if you're looking at mock drafts, if you're doing mock drafts right now, you're not getting a running back in the first round. So if you're picking with one of those first 3 picks in the first round or in the second round, then you've kind of got every option available to you. And then you could also see how the draft is going, pivot off of that, and then, possibly move back, still get your guy, all the different things. But I think that an early second is a little too rich for my blood, especially seeing as they both don't kind of profile as the starters at the moment.
I respect it. It's a good analysis there from both of you guys there. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I don't think that giving up an early second with the potential what could or could not be yet at this point for either one of these players. I think Charbonnet, like you guys kind of said, mid-second, it's pretty solid because you don't know what his situation is like. You assume that Seattle's going to hopefully run the ball maybe a little bit more with his defensive mindset coach here now we have again. So that, Charbonnet could end up seeing a little bit more work in the offense there. Roshan, while I like him, he's definitely not worth an early second. He's probably a late second, early third right now. And if you could get a third, I'd be all in that right now. But probably nowhere near an early second. Probably mid second. Probably even still. I like him, but I think you're paying that at like peak value with Roshan too at that point. While Charbonnet deserves the mid second round value right now for his game. And then last but not least, this one I'm going to change this one a little bit because obviously Chase Brown, didn't really do too much, but he definitely made a spark at time for this Bengals offense here. Would you be willing to give up a early third round pick? Let's say that for Chase Brown right now. We know Joe Mixon is in the final year of his contract. We know he's a little older, injury potential could go with him. They might even cut him. You don't know what's going to happen with this Bengals team here. Would you be willing to give up that early third round pick for Chase Brown?
I don't know if I would go early third. If we could drop it back to a mid third or a late third, I'd consider it. Chase Brown, there was, a couple plays where he showed some flashes this year. And looking at Mixon, he's trending towards the back end of that prime age, and he's going into that last year of his contract. But I just don't think we've seen enough Chase Brown to really for sure that he would hold the job there if anything happened to Mixon. And so I think if we could push it to a mid or late third, then I would possibly go for it. But even an early third right now, just with the lack of what at least I've seen out of him in terms of playing time total, but also just, a couple flashes in the pan as opposed to, someone like Tajay Spears where we saw sort of consistent flashes from him. I think I'd have to say no on a late third or on a early third.
All right. Dave, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, early third might be where it's at. At the end of the day, we go into the NFL draft with a certain amount of players that we really like, and that condenses after we see landing spot and draft capital when you're like, man, that guy that I thought was good, apparently not. He's a 7th round pick or one undrafted like Sean Tucker last year. And that was a health issue, but there was a couple other guys, Rakim Jarrett and other guys that went a little lower. He's another guy that, we really have a lot of unknowns. So if I can get him for, early third or, mid third, because someone really, really is desperate for picks, maybe I'll do that. If I have him, I'd probably hold him, about that time. But I do think when the draft comes around that's probably about his price point, mid or early third. And he doesn't really profile. He's not a bigger guy. I don't really profile as a starting back. He's kind of the Giovanni Bernard to Joe Mixon's Joe Mixon. And so, what happens, if Joe Mixon leaves, do they bring somebody in or do they draft somebody who's got higher draft capital than Chase Brown? And so, I do like Chase Brown. Another person that's not on this list that I think is interesting is Kendre Miller. He, flashed at the end of the season last year, had kind of a nightmare season in regards to like missing almost all of camp with injuries and preseason. Then he was, Kamara's suspension got reduced. But, they could move on from Jamal Williams. But Jamal Williams was terrible last year. He's a very inefficient runner. And so I would, look at Kendre Miller kind of in the same vein as Chase Brown of just like a guy might pique some interest in. And you could maybe buy low. If I was going to buy somebody, you don't want to buy low on the offseason. Kendre Miller might be someone, before any news happens with Kamara.
Well, that leads into my next slide here. Bounce back hope. Kendre Miller. I would assume he's probably your favorite player on this list then, Dave.
Yeah. I've already talked about him. So the second guy would be I'll leave Chris Rodriguez for you guys. Eric Gray is interesting. Saquon is obviously most likely out of town. The Giants said they're not going to tag him twice. He wants to stay there. Eric Gray showed a little bit of flashes before he got hurt at the end of the year. Did not really pop off at the combine. But what I really like about him is his pass catching skill set. There's only 2 running backs that graded out as top 10 at the running back position at running and at receiving. It was Zach Charbonnet and it was Eric Gray. Eric Gray is an accomplished receiver. He's every running back can catch the ball, but not every running back can run routes, can make stuff happen in space. Eric Gray is one of those guys, and that offers some, upside in fantasy. So he's another interesting guy, and I think you can get him for nothing. You can just, throw him in on the trade.
He's your deep sleeper of the bunch. I like it.
Yeah.
I love it. Coach Tyler, let's answer the first question. Is it Kendre Miller for you too, or who's the best out of this group here?
It's Kendre Miller for me up top. And then, second, if you're going to leave it for me, I'm going to take it, Dave. I'm going to go with Chris Rodriguez there. Just the lack of Antonio Gibson being what we've hoped that he would be. I think Chris Rodriguez has a good ability and a good shot to slide into that number 2 role. And with the future of Washington, there's a hope that the offense gets a little bit better and that they, take a Drake May number 2 and sort of elevate what they've been doing. And Chris Rodriguez would definitely be a beneficiary of that. But I think resounding off of what Dave was saying with Kendre Miller, just kind of all things fell the way that we didn't want them to. But with Jamal Williams looking like sort of what we expected Jamal Williams to, we think of regression as opposed or with what his season was 2 years ago. We didn't think that he would regress this hard, but we saw the regression coming. And so I would go Kendre, obviously the best, but then Chris Rodriguez, if he's sitting there and I got the option to take him, I'm going to take him.
Yeah, so this grouping here, I'm going to say who they are in this grouping here. You have Kendre Miller, you have Chris Rodriguez, Tank Bigsby, Israel Adebakanda, Deuce Vaughn, Eric Gray, Sean Tucker, Kenny McIntyre, Zach Evans, and Evan Hall. So like I said, I'm kind of with the guys on this one. Kendre Miller, obviously the best of this bunch here in terms of potential moving forward. The Saints are in bad cap situations. They could be moving on from a lot of people this offseason here to try to save some cap. And Miller could find himself in the starting job this coming season, or at least the backup to Alvin Kamara if they choose to keep Kamara on the team here. We saw like a small flash for like a half a quarter where he had like 4 receptions for 640 yards, like pretty quickly in one drive. So this man can play. Just this season wasn't for him. Injuries occurred. Just kind of got buried a little bit based on what this team was kind of trying to do and using Alvin Kamara basically as the only guy on that offense. So Miller is definitely a guy out of this bunch that you want to go after. I'm still relatively high on Tank Bigsby. I know this season has no indication showing him being really good at the NFL level yet. But I believe that there's some changes that will have to be coming from the Jags this coming season here based on how bad they performed this year and not making the playoffs here. And there has to be something that has to be done with the run game. Yes, Travis Etienne was a top 10 running back in fantasy, but he ran terribly. He wasn't really a good runner. He just happened to catch a lot of touchdowns, or run for a lot of touchdowns. So I think there could be somewhat of a change in terms of the running motions there, giving a guy maybe like Tank Bigsby the ball a little bit more. I'm not saying he's going to take over for ETN or anything, but there could be more potential for him to see the field this coming season. Again, I did a terrible job at trade valuing these old rookies with this draft class here. So we can pretty much obviously say if someone's willing to give, if you're willing to give up a 3rd round pick for a guy like Kendre Miller right now.
A 3rd rounder, yeah.
Yeah, 3rd rounder. All right, cool.
Yeah, I'd go up an early 3rd. I mean, I was just listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty show last month. They were talking one quarterback, and so something everyone needs to consider is one quarterback is a vastly different value. They were talking about a mid-second for Kendre Miller, which I'm like, for me, that's just too much. Like, I feel like you're not buying the dip at all, and you drafted him right around that spot, and he did nothing to sustain his value. So, if I'm gonna, early 3rd, yeah, late second is where I'm like, I have Kendre Miller on a few teams. If you threw me a late 2nd, you're getting him. Here you can have him, but an early 3rd, yeah, I'll buy him for an early 3rd for sure. And for Bigsby, I have, if someone offered me 210 for Bigsby, I'd jump on it. Mid 3rd is probably where I have his value, or late 3rd.
All right, I like it. All right, so let's move on away from here, and we will get into our quick commercial break. Our promos, guys. Obviously, you guys know that me and Coach Tyler do write for Dynasty Nerds here and there. They have a fantastic tool, the Dynasty Nerds GM, fantastic for those who play Dynasty. It is a very, very amazing tool for trade values, looking at your overall team's valuation and trying to understand when and when you should not be tanking or rebuilding or competing. So it's a great time to go out there, download the app, use their website, use the promo code COACH. And start finding different ways to evaluate your team and really get good insight overall for your dynasty roster and league. And of course, if you don't use this already, I know Dave has used this before. I know he's on there. It's another fantastic tool if you're looking to find a more personal one-on-one kind of conversation for your dynasty team, or even in season. But for this dynasty offseason here, if you're looking for a cheap way to get an understanding of what your fantasy team looks like, what trades you can make, what your roster looks like, jump on a call with me, or even Dave, and have us help you guys reevaluate your teams and make changes that you need to make. A fantastic app. I used it a lot this offseason, during the season with a lot of people. So a lot of fun that way. So it's another thing you can do. And they also have an app too. So a lot of apps here for you guys to help win your fantasy rosters outside of listen to the coaches. So let's get back into the second half of our show here. We're talking free agency. So it's kind of like a preview to free agency here. So the first listing here are the starter types, the guys who were starters this past season who, they had the big name, but they might not be worth starters anymore, but they're their starter types. And you have Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, and DeAndre Swift here. Now, Dave, I'll let you go first. Who is the best out of this bunch you would consider targeting as a contender? Because obviously you're not buying any of these guys if you're rebuilding right now.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit difference of an age of something to consider. Whenever I look at this list, that's one of the things that I first try to look at the ages. And so Saquon and Jacobs are similar age, so it's a little bit younger. And Pollard's probably around the same age as Jacobs and Barkley. So for me, Barkley's the one that's done it. Has done it more consistently. I know he's had quite a few workload, and he had those two injury-ridden seasons. But I look back at Christian McCaffrey, and 2 years ago, right before the Carolina Panthers traded him, everybody was worried. Oh my gosh, hamstring injuries. He's over 25. And they were given. I got Christian McCaffrey for like a mid to late first singular. I've won the league twice since. So, Christian McCaffrey was a guy, and Saquon Barkley may not be Christian McCaffrey, but he's also been really, really good on really bad offenses. Imagine this guy were to actually play on a good offense. So, I got him going to Houston Texans this summer. Will be fun. And even if he goes back to the Giants, I mean, what's the worst thing? Was he running back 6 this year? So Saquon for me is the top of the heap.
All right, I like it. Coach Tyler, where are you at on this list here?
Yeah, Saquon's definitely on top for me. I really hope Dave is right as a Texans fan. I would love to see him in a Texans uniform. But the only thing that would scare me with Barkley is if he ends up on a good team or a good offense, it might not all flow through him the way that it does in New York, where he, is the offense. If he ends up somewhere like Houston that has a passing game, or he ends up really with any team that can move the ball past just him. So Saquon is definitely the best if we're just going pound for pound athlete that we want to take in fantasy. But assuming that he goes somewhere better than New York, I do expect to see a little bit of a workload drop. I see that it would be more quality touches, but maybe not as many touches. But it would definitely, my top 3 would go Barkley, Jacobs, Pollard in that order.
I like it. I like both your guys' answer there. I'm on the train of Josh Jacobs right now. He's the youngest of the bunch, I think. Oh, besides DeAndre Swift, obviously, but in terms of true workhorse, who I think I would trust, it's Josh Jacobs. I don't want to put an injury label on Barkley because he's, but like he does have an injury history. Whether or not that ever happens again, I don't want to hold it against him. But with Josh Jacobs, I feel like I just trust that potential for whatever workload he's giving at the next level, at whatever team he goes to. Or if he even goes back to the Raiders, there were a portion of the season from weeks, weeks 4 to 12, he was RB4 on the season here on a bad Raiders team. And now I know Saquon's done that for a bad Giants team too, but I feel like Josh Jacobs can handle a big workload consistently. And I'm not really too concerned about him having, fatigue from being hurt. He had a quad injury this past year. He'll be ready to go whatever team he lands on in the season here. But in terms of what you can get for probably at least 3 more seasons, I think I do trust Josh Jacobs a little bit more to last 3 full more seasons of high end of value, kind of like Derrick Henry the last 3 years, where you can trust him. It might not be obviously Derrick Henry, but he's someone that I feel like I can trust for the next 3 years, and I'm not too concerned about any injuries or anything stopping him from being a really strong back right now at the NFL level. So he's my guy who's the best one for me personally out of this group right now. Are you willing to give up a late first round pick for any one of these guys right now? Or a first round pick? Let's just say a first round pick. How many of these guys are worth at least a first?
I'll go with the ones that Tyler answered are worth it. I mean, Swift is questionable. And partly when I say they're worth it, it's just because you have to. You got to pay what, you can't just be like, Steve, this is my price. He's not going to say, okay. I mean, the market value. Yeah. Like, I don't think none of these guys got long-term contracts for a reason. And so the top 3 guys listed all got franchise tag last year. And so, and none of them are probably going to get monster contracts this offseason. So yeah, spending 2 firsts is not going to happen. Spending a mid first, probably not going to happen. But yeah, a 110, 119, and you're getting an RB1. Yeah, I mean that's what you got to do. And so for me, like Saquon and Jacobs, I would put Pollard more close to Swift, where more of an early second. If not, I might need something back. I'll give you 110, but I get an early third back or something.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah, I'll hold pat with my top 3. That's really with the hope that Pollard goes back to Dallas, just running behind that offensive line. But yeah, I feel like those top 3 are the ones that, Swift, he's just questionable with team and, ability to stay healthy from the earlier part of his career with the Lions, but he just hasn't been a feature guy as much as we hope to see him. As much as we had hoped to see him as a feature guy. And then Eckler and Henry just come down to age. You want to compete, but with the question of, we started to see it, somewhat with Eckler this year, but with Henry,
You're on mute, Tyler. Why you fixed? Oh, there you go.
There we go. No, I'm good. AirPod died. That's on me. No. And, with Henry, we saw it with Eckler, but with Henry, just, when is he going to kick it? And you don't want to be, holding a grenade when it goes off type thing. So I'd stick with my top 3 right there. I'd happily give a late first. I say happily. I'd give a late first for the fact of needing that RB1 on my team.
Right. Absolutely. And, if you're looking for potential upside, this is the time to buy these guys right here. That's how I feel. You could buy them in season, obviously, because you'd rather wait until if your team's ready to compete. But if you're looking to take advantage of a player that can offer you competition for your team to help you win one, it's now to buy these free agent running backs that are in those older ages because, like Dave said a couple of years ago, CMC, people thought, oh, he's getting close to the end of his line here. And now he's probably the best back in football still somehow. And he's older. And a lot of these guys, like once they sign a contract, their value is just going to skyrocket. Not skyrocket, but it's going to go up and you're not going to get the same value. Like you could potentially get 1 first-round pick for any one of these guys right now. If someone's willing to give up, any of them for a first-round pick, that is the risk you take because you do it after free agency. If Saquon goes to Houston, you're not getting just a first-round pick for him right now. If Josh Jacobs goes to Houston, you're not getting a first-round pick for him either right now. Tony Pollard. If Derrick Henry ends up in Dallas, you're not getting even though Derrick Henry's 30 years old, the hype between him going there or somewhere where it's a favorable place or like the Ravens or something, you're not going to get that value. Then you have to wait until in season when they actually have a downfall. It might be too late then. But if you could get them now for a first round pick alone and you're a contending team, it might be worth it by taking that risk right now. All right, we're just going to go ahead because we're running on time here. Going over to the next grouping. Actually, no, there's one more person I want to talk about because the next guys, there's not too many we got to talk about here. I want to go back to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is coming off a monster season here. Yes, he's 30 years old right now. Do you guys believe there's still something in the tank for him? Do you guys believe that if he lands with like the Houston, if he goes back to Tennessee or even he lands like the Ravens, do you believe that there's still good value for him moving forward?
Yeah. I believe.
Go ahead, DJ.
I believe that there's a little bit left in the tank. Like you said, he's just coming off this year where, we just keep waiting on him to, he's worn down. He's older. He's had so many touches throughout his career. Like we're just kind of guesstimating on when we're finally going to start to see that drop off. And I mean, he proved just about everyone wrong this year. And so I think there's a little bit of value left in the tank. I don't think it's a, CMC going to San Francisco where he just shoots up to be this like at his peak value and peak performance like he used to be. But I think that there's, a year, hopefully 2 years left in the tank. It might not be, vintage Derrick Henry, but it's going to be the same consistent numbers that you've seen from him from year to year.
Dave, how do you feel about Henry?
Yeah, I mean, you see with a lot of these veterans, like you said it earlier, this is the time to buy them. And on the opposite, this is not the time to sell them because you're going to get really bad offers. So this is the time to buy them because, they're like, all right, Steve just offered me a third and TJ just offered me a third. Yeah, I'll take your late second. But, I look at Henry as if you look at some of these other day 3 running backs. Just because they're 22 years old doesn't mean they're going to play, running back or starting running back for the next 4 years. Like Dameon Pierce is a perfect example of a guy, Tyler Algier. Like if you sold both those guys, or James Robinson, I mean, don't think just because the guy's 23 and Derrick Henry's 30 that you're getting a 7-year difference. They both might have 1 year as a starter. But he's more of, mid-second, late second, the same thing you're looking at for a Raheem Mostert last year, where he could be a guy that has 20 touchdowns. Could be a Jamal Williams kind of a season. Yeah, he's probably not going to get the same amount of carries, but he goes to the Ravens. He goes to one of these top teams, top offenses, and gets a lot more scoring opportunities. Yeah, it's going to be good. And so, I mean, you look. All the Titans end up going to the Eagles at some point. Maybe he goes there. Jalen Hurts isn't, having to do so much tush push. And so, I think Derrick Henry is someone that I would target because I don't think he's going to go to a bad landing spot. Like he's looking for a ring. And rings are going to go to top offenses. He's not going to go like DeAndre Hopkins did and sign with the Titans. He's going to go find somewhere where he can go chase a ring, Buffalo or one of these places.
Yeah, like I said, I would be sending out trade offers for a couple second-round picks to see if someone will bite. Yeah, maybe you're spending a little bit more than you want to on an aging running back who's 30 years old, but I just don't see where he falls off a cliff after one season unless an injury occurs of him. You look at a guy like a Hall of Famer like Adrian Peterson at 30 years old, he ran for 1,100 yards and 14 touchdowns. I still believe that Derrick Henry has one more season like that in him if he lands in the right spot. And paying that, like I said, I've been saying it a couple times here, paying that now might seem like you're paying too much for a 30-year-old running back. But by October, you're like, wow, I got Derrick Henry on the cheap for this coming season here, and I'm thrilled about it. And I think wherever he lands, there's still at least one more Derrick Henry-like season left ahead of him here. And you definitely want to buy into that now while you can. All right, next one's here. We got the free agent running backs, the two RB starters, basically guys who kind of had a split role on their offense this past season. Guys like Gus Edwards, Zeke Elliott, Devin Singletary, Deontay Foreman, Antonio Gibson, I don't even know if I want to say Dalvin Cook. But again, Dalvin Cook's only a year away from being like a superstar. And then AJ Dillon. So out of this grouping here, who's the best that you guys want to have on your team, trade for, whatever it is? Dave, go ahead.
I mean, to be honest, none of them. I mean, Gus Edwards looked good second year off of the injury. He's also was on one of the top offenses. We kind of see what that looks like. He probably signs back with Baltimore, but what happens? He's going to get Derrick Henry coming along with him or Josh Jacobs? None of these guys, I believe, are going to hold steady based on the what's out there as far as being starters. I mean, they could fall into it. So not targeting any of them, but the Singletary and Gus Edwards be the only two guys that I'd be interested in.
Thank you. Coach Tyler?
If Gus ends up with Baltimore and one of those starters that we just talked about doesn't end up there, I would take Gus out of this list in a heartbeat. We've got J.K. Dobbins coming off a torn Achilles, and I don't know about y'all, but I know a torn Achilles for a running back is, it's the last straw for me. I can't hold on to a guy after that, just with the history of what it's done to players. And then we saw Keaton Mitchell, I want to say it was a torn ACL very late in the season. And, he was starting to explode and starting to get a little bit more and more workload as those weeks went along. And then we see, a major injury that he's going to have to come back from. And even on the front end of that timetable, he's still, maybe a month into the season. So if Gus ends up back in Baltimore and they don't bring in one of those bigger name guys to either compete with him or to try and make him another 2 RB starter, I think Gus would be able to retain the most value here.
All right. I like it. For me, the best, I still want to give a shot at Antonio Gibson, and I'll talk more about him when we get to the next question, but he's definitely someone who's still relatively young, who, started off his career strong, but, I think whether it was in performance or if it was the coaching, things hasn't turned around for him the last 2 years, a year and a half now. So he's definitely someone I'd still be interested in. And more strategically, a guy like Deontay Foreman is probably cheap. And he's performed whenever situation he's gone into at point. And again, that's all fantasy running backs are. Get them when they have their little hot streaks. If Foreman lands in a situation where he's the backup somewhere and the starter gets hurt, Foreman comes into a strong RB2 play right now. Right now, you could probably get him for a late third, maybe a fourth. He's a 27-year-old running back, 28 maybe now, who doesn't have a ton of tread on his tires. And when he's given the workload, he's done well. Again, more strategically to get a depth on your running back, because all these other guys probably will get not starting jobs, but are more highlighted because of their names or whatever it may be. But Foreman continues to kind of run under the radar a lot of times. Could be a good buy to get depth on your team without having to spend a lot of money. So I guess, and you guys really didn't talk too much about Antonio Gibson. I guess you guys don't believe there's big upside with Antonio Gibson moving forward now.
For me, I mean, he lost trust in the coaching staff. Maybe he can go somewhere and find someone that believes in him. But, I had the privilege of interviewing some of the running backs at the combine last year, and the first thing they all talked about was pass protection. And one of the reasons that the team does not like Antonio Gibson is he's not a good pass protector. He was a converted receiver. And so that's some of the things that is a learning curve. He hasn't, come around. He has the size, but he just doesn't have the technique and sometimes doesn't have the willingness. And then he has the fumbling issues on top of it. So he profiles as a great back. He's still young. I mean, and we know he can be good. He's top 10 running back for fantasy. And he had 2 good seasons in a row. I'm out because I mean, it's too many years of disappointing, to where like, I'm just going to chase someone with more upside. If he's, I got a really deep roster and you want to throw him in on a trade, that's fine. I can drop one of these random dudes that I got on there, but like, he's not someone I'm thinking of even playing at all next year.
All right, Coach Tyler.
Yeah. If he went somewhere else, there would be the chance, depending on where he went, that he could possibly find some trust with me. But, I just think back to when the Washington coaching staff said, we think Antonio Gibson can be our Christian McCaffrey. And then that just fell on its face so quickly. And, that's just not how anyone expected his career to go. But, he blew up and he was doing great. And then it just, the tires seemed to come out from under him. And there's a chance that another coaching staff takes a chance on him and reinvents his game to where he can go back to what he was those first couple seasons. But I think in Washington, he's lost it. And, it would take a pretty big feat to gain that trust back for me.
And I respect that.
One last point on Gibson. He's been on the trade block the last 2 trade deadlines. And I don't know if Washington just hates him and didn't trade him on purpose because they just dislike this dude. But like, nobody was falling over themselves trying to trade for him. And that is another concern. It was very clear to everybody that Washington did not like this guy. They had him on like he was a gunner on special teams in preseason, and nobody was like, let me just trade for him. And so that's another concern.
Yeah, that is concerning. Yeah, I could also see the Commanders. He's like, oh, he was a 3rd round pick. We won a 2nd round pick in return. Look what he's done in his career. Look at the stats. But yeah, I do believe there's potential, upside for him. Not potential, upside for him if he does land in a different situation. We've seen backs over their careers get into the right system that fits their skill sets. The pass protection is definitely a major issue, but he's been a guy who's seen 50 targets basically all 4 years he's been in the NFL. He's got history of being a double-digit touchdown running back in the league here. So for me, like if someone's willing, if I can get him for a late 3rd or 3rd round pick right now, I'm willing to buy into that. I still think if he lands, I'd rather buy it now because once he lands on the team, it might not be the best situation. I'd rather see what I could get out of him now because I don't think anyone's really liking, as we've already talked about it, no one's really liking Antonio Gibson right now. So, all right, so let's go and skip to the last slide here. We're going to skip a slide, but that's okay. The only other people we had on the other slide here, no one really irrelevant here if you're watching live. So we're going to talk about some of these IR running backs real quick here. The Cam Akers, the Damian Harris, and the J.K. Dobbins, all guys who have season-ending injuries. Some of them have multiple torn Achilles. But, is there any value left out of these guys? Like, could you see any one of them landing with a team this year? No. Dave says no.
No.
I respect it.
Yeah, Harris, he offers 0 upside in the receiving game. Really, J.K. Dobbins does as well. But J.K. Dobbins coming off 2 major injuries. And the Achilles is just, we talked about Deonta Foreman earlier. Deonta Foreman actually has played well, but it took him 2 or 3 years before he started back up again. Akers is coming off of his 2nd torn Achilles. Akers is done. I think he's, out of the league. Damian Harris, I don't think he's too far behind. There's too many young running backs coming in, and these guys they don't offer a lot of upside, and they're looking for more versatile backs in the league these days, and they just don't have that.
I like it. Coach Tyler.
Yeah, like I voiced with J.K. Dobbins earlier when talking about the Ravens. Same thing with Cam Akers. Those Achilles are, it's the end all be all for me. If you've, even with guys like Foreman that have taken a couple of years to get out of it, there's still, you see sort of that step that's possibly just a second behind or half a second behind from where it was. But with the double Achilles for Akers and the emergence of Kyron Williams, I don't see a team taking a ton of chance on Cam Akers. He might sign a super cheap contract somewhere, but I don't think that anyone is going to take a chance on someone with the injury history that he's had. JK, they're a running team in Baltimore, and this was supposed to be the year coming off the ACL. It just wasn't. And then Damian Harris, like Dave said, there's just not a lot of value to be had, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Bills are, they're sticking with James Cook or they're adding a little bit later in the draft. But I wouldn't want any of these guys on my team. I definitely wouldn't be buying any of these guys for my team.
I did try to buy Akers for a third round, the 310, but I was countered with Dobbins a second, and for my first round pick, I was like, "Come on, man, come on! Like you can't be offering that back to me." The 310, I feel like was a decent value. Like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? Yeah, I mean, none of these guys really shout out like you want to like try to buy low on them. If you have them on your team and if someone's willing to give you a third, why not sell them off? Because at this point, you might hit with a rookie pick, even though those are hard to hit. But I think it's just the same value, and you're getting a younger back that might have a chance still, or a younger player that has a chance still to do something somewhat well else. I still want to see if J.K. Dobbins can come back and maybe sign with the Ravens again. But again, that's probably fool's gold there. There's probably no hope for these guys to really take that step forward. You really can't trust them on the field, and you're not buying Dobbins at any value right now that's worth buying. Harris is, he's a 2 down back, and unless he lands in the right situation, he's probably not going to be all that great. And then Akers, double Achilles, is just no hope for him to be a guy that sees anywhere close to a complimentary role in an offense anytime soon. All right. Well, that is going to end our running back dynasty values series part 1. A lot of fun tonight, guys. I had a lot of fun having you guys on, of course, here. We'll do part 2 next week. Dave, since you are our guest, I'll let you, sign off first. Is there anything you want to say? Anything you got going on? The floor is yours, my friend.
I appreciate it. Got a 5-round Superflex rookie mock draft coming out. Had a few different writers from different sites join me, including Pat Fitzmaurice. So talking a little bit about rookies, and I threw in my rankings and some ADP so you can see how things have changed since the Senior Bowl.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And we appreciate having you on as always, man. Good friend of the show, obviously, and hope we have you back on soon, man.
Appreciate it.
And of course, Coach Tyler, anything you want to say before we go on?
Yeah, keep your eyes peeled on some Dynasty Nerds Devy content. We're getting ready we're jumping into rookie season. First day of the offseason, we've got rookie profiles coming out, mock drafts coming out, and if you use that code COACH with your subscription to the Dynasty Nerds, you also get access to that all 22 film room with all those rookies, so you can start doing your own film breakdown and feel like one of the coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been doing that a lot right now, so it's a lot of fun getting into that. A lot of hours it's going to be, but it's all worth the fun. So, but we appreciate everyone who tuned in. Like I said, whether it's on our YouTube channel or Twitter or Facebook, whatever you're listening to live, we definitely appreciate it. We love having people jump on the show, or if you're listening live afterwards on like Spotify, podcast, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcast, we definitely appreciate it. Also on TikTok. So check that out too. I'm starting to post some videos there. Not great at it, but I will get it. I will figure it out by the time the season rolls around this year, I promise. And again, we'll be back next Monday, guys. We'll be talking about the second part of our dynasty values for running back. So if you didn't hear a running back on your fantasy team that you didn't hear about tonight, more than likely you're going to hear about him next week here with our next guest on the show. So we thank you guys all for listening. Tune in until next time, guys, and have a good one.
Good luck.
Back to back is not far-fetched.